The best dealerships in this industry all have a strategic process for the key areas of their business. The process is known and practiced by all those involved. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important processes that I have found in a marine dealership is the trade-in process. But in order to give it the proper attention it deserves, we need to recognize it as part of an overall strategy for running your business. There's a lot of different strategies for different segments of the business, and the best peak performing dealers have those strategies down pat. Trade-ins at a number that will allow you to average 25 to 30% or more when they are sold is essential to running a peak performing dealership. I am still amazed that I still run across dealers today that consider a used boat almost like it's got a disease or something, and they got to get rid of it just as fast as they can, and they will wholesale it right away. And with the right process, that does not need to be, or they even make 10% or something like they would on a brokerage. But with the right process, truly, I've got dealers, peak performing dealers around the country and in parts of Canada that are getting 25 to 30% or more on their used boats. It is my hope today for you to go away with an understanding of this sales strategy, including this trade-in evaluation tool that I'm going to share with you, that will help transition the customer through the grief process to accepting a much more reasonable number than they had in their minds when they came in. We're going to talk more about the grief process in a minute. It is integral to a successful trade-in process. So we'll get started. The sales process for a proper trade-in amount, called the ACV, or actual cash value, this is the wholesale value of the used boat, starts with the new boat sale. By the way, this process is the same one used for used as well. The first thing to know is, in order to make the higher margins on a new boat, you've got to get the emotions involved. This is done by doing 4 things before we ever get to price. The first is sell yourself. Then you sell the dealership. And then you sell the lifestyle. If you do a great job on these 3, the customer will be looking for reasons to justify buying whatever product you're selling. Also, using well thought out stories will make it easier for the customer to relate with you during this process. My wife and I were car shopping. Her 2003 Mini was getting to be worn out, and we went around to different places. And I remember what I was disappointed in. I thought we were going to see better salespeople, but we did not. And we did run across one that was pretty good. I kind of liked the presentation, the approach, and all that. And I found myself looking for ways to justify buying what that person was selling. Now, it turned out my wife didn't find anything she liked. But I noticed that I watched it happen in me while I was doing that. And that's and I promise you, folks, if you'll do a good job on those first 3, sell yourself, the dealership, and the lifestyle, then when you get to and we'll talk about product in a minute here, but they will look for reasons to do business with you. Now, the next one is you're selling the product. So it's the sell yourself, the dealership, the lifestyle. Then you sell the product, and we haven't gotten to price yet. You sell the product. Now, most of you know how to do this. This is your feature benefit presentation that you pretty much all know how to do. And if you don't, get with your factory reps. They can teach you how to do that. This is not part of this class. Now, once we've gone through all of that, now we can talk about price. We've sold ourselves, the dealership, the lifestyle, and now the product. Then and only then do we discuss price. Now, if a customer wants to push you on getting a price, give them a range, be kind of vague about it. You don't want to get down to exact details. If you use a window sticker, that's all the better. They get some kind of general idea. We'll talk a little more about that. Then the other thing that I think we need to discuss, if you're going to really do this right, is to get a budget done, what we would call a strategic profit plan. Get a budget done and know what margins you really need to have on your boat in order to be able to, the margins you need to have on your boats in order to be able to hit the desired net profit that you want to achieve. Then you're ready to get into it. Now, typically, I suggest start your pricing at MSRP, or what I like to call the brand's selling price. So whatever brand you have, XYZ selling price, ABC selling price, don't call it MSRP on your window sticker, or when you present the first price to the customer, call it that brand's selling price. And one of the reasons why we want to start at retail is it helps to define the value of what that boat is in the customer's mind. Too many dealers start their pricing at the number that they want, and you end up 3 to 7% less than wherever you start. So if you want to end higher, you got to start higher. Now, some dealers will discount a small percentage from the list price at this point, such as on a window sticker. This can vary depending on how much margin the manufacturer gives you up front. The key is to leave you plenty of room for over-allowance. Now, over-allowance is the difference between what is shown on the paper for the trade and what the ACV is of the unit, actual cash value, the wholesale value of that trade. Now, this is just a sample, and I know that I'm probably like preaching to the choir here. Most of you know how to do this, but just for the case that we've got some new folks here, I'm going to run through it real quick. You've got your new boat price. We're saying it's $30,000. We're going to discount it $2,000. So most of us would call it a purchase price of $28,000. If this were on a window sticker, I would call it the XYZ brand selling price. Then you have a trade-in allowance of, let's say, $9,000 with a difference of $19,000. Now, for accounting purposes, down here, the trade-in allowance is $9,000, but we're going to ACV the unit at $8,000, so there's $1,000 of over-allowance. Everybody with me so far? And that $1,000, when you go to book the deal, we'll lower that selling price from $28,000 to $27,000. Now the accounting all works, the trade difference works, the tax, everything works out. Unless you sell a product with a fixed retail price, I strongly suggest not starting your asking price at the number you want to end up with for the reason I just explained. This is guaranteed to lower the margin on new and used boats. As I stated earlier, typically you're going to end up 3 to 7% less than wherever number you start at. So let's start at a higher number in order to end at a higher number. Then, remember this, folks, negotiate in hundreds, not thousands. One of my 20 group members years ago made this comment to me. He said, that one statement made me more money last year than anything else we had said in that 20 group. Negotiate in hundreds, not thousands. The other thing is, you want to have a consistent pricing policy, a process rather, that is always the same. Now, it can be different for different brands because the margins vary and that kind of thing, but it needs to be consistent within each brand or category. Another thing I think it's good to know before we get started into the trade sheet is that there are 4 types of buyers. There's the cash buyer, there's the trade buyer, and the difference buyer, and then the payment buyer. The payment buyer is the easiest of all to sell because typically you can adjust your rate and terms and come out with what you're looking for. The trade buyer and the difference buyer are 2 sides of the same coin. I have found when I was on the floor selling in our dealership, I had customers that we tried going with the one price deal. And folks, I don't want to say that this is the only way. Every example I give you, there are exceptions and people who are doing it well. But as a general rule, the things that I'm sharing with you work throughout the industry. So Now, the trade buyer, they're looking for how much they can get for their trade. If you have started your price higher where you can allow them more money on trade, then you like their trade better than the guy down the street who's not doing that. So, therefore, I've seen them where I had actually a lower difference, and they bought a boat with a higher difference because it had a higher value on the trade. So it does make a difference. And then, of course, the difference buyers is two sides of that same coin. They're just looking at what's the lowest number I can deal with on difference. Now, also, this is also, to me, very important, is there are 4 seasons that attract a buyer. The first season is the early adopter. They naturally want the latest and greatest model and are willing to pay for it. They want to be the first on their block to own it. The typical season is July to September. This is when the new models come out, and they want that latest and greatest. The next one is the bargain buyer. They're looking for a bargain and will only make a purchase if it's a good deal. They ideally want last year's model at a discount. The typical season is August to maybe January, February, if you've got some of them left in your boat shows. Now, here's the key on selling to the bargain buyer. You move your new models in the showroom as soon as you've got enough to present. You take the last year models out of the showroom. A customer comes in looking for that boat, then, or whatever model they're looking for, show them the new model, even if they want to look at the bargain boat. Show them the new model, give them all the features and benefits and the dog and pony show on that. But then when it comes down to price, hold the price up on the new model at 25 or 30 points. And then when the customer asks, can I get a better deal? You explain to them, Mr. Customer, I can't give you a better deal on that. It's a brand new model, they're hard to get, and so forth. But I can give you a smoking deal on a non-current. And I've got one just like it, and then you just go and show them, and you might have a half a dozen of them in the back lot, but I've got one model, and you figure out the color and all of what they want, and take them and show them that. Then all you got to do is explain the difference between the current model and the last year model, and then price that boat about 10% less than the new model. And that way you have created shopping in your own dealership. You don't force them to go out somewhere else to do their shopping. They can do it inside. So if you sold yourself, the dealership, the lifestyle, and then now the product, and they want to do business with you, then when you give them that price, most likely they're going to buy the boat. Now the next one is the planner. The planner will research a product and are willing to wait to get exactly what they want, especially if they can be shown how it saves money. These are typically current owners of boats, and they're wanting to trade it in. We did not. One of my clients in one of my 20 groups developed what they called the Smart Buyer Program, and we discussed that in a presentation I did at the MDC a couple of years ago, and it was designed specifically for this buyer. Now, it shows them how much money the customer can save by trading their boat in the fall, along with better than boat show pricing that in the fall. So, and then you can save on winterization, storage costs, insurance costs, etc. Plus, they get the new ordered boat exactly the way they want it. This is a very effective sales strategy designed to sell to this type of buyer, and it works. This 20 group member sold 3 boats the first year he did it in the fall. The second year, he sold 22 boats on the Smart Buyer Program in the fall. Some of those took immediate delivery, but most of them, were ordered boats. They were selling slots in the future, and so the boats came in, they turned over. But the second benefit of doing this Smart Buyer Program, how many of us have had a particular model and sold a daylights out of that model one year, so you figure you're going to do really well with it the next year. You order deep on a darn thing, and it doesn't sell at all. It just goes flat. How many have had that happen? Yeah. Anybody who's been around the business for a while, we've all had that happen. Well, the beauty of this program is if you've got the Smart Buyer program going in the fall, you know what they're buying because they're ordering it. So now you know what to have for your second trimester orders or quarter, whatever your manufacturer's on. You know what kind of boats to be buying, even the colors and the models, because you're selling them early and you're taking them off another benefit is you take them off the market before the boat show. Whoops, hold on a second here. Well, okay. Oh, here it is. I had this all worked out on my computer. I have a Windows 8 laptop, had it all worked out, and they don't have the connection, the digital connection to here. And so now I'm having to use their last year model computer, and it's a little hard to keep it straight. So anyway, just bear with me here. I think I mentioned to you this dealer sold 3 boats the first year. He sold 22 boats the second year. This September, when I saw him at the 20 group meeting, he had already sold 22 boats on the Smart Buyer program by September. So I don't know where he's going to end up, but it's got to be pushing 30 boats by the time this season's over. Now, how many people would like to have 25 or 30 boats sold? Now, what it amounts to is, folks, though, you got to train your customers. We've trained them for years that the best deals are at the boat show, and then they're kind of figuring out now that the best deals can be bought all season long practically. But if you'll do this kind of program, then it should deliver some really good results for you. Now, the last of the 4 buyers is the impulse buyer. This one is making their purchase on the spur of the moment. They typically will tell you they will buy the boat if I can have it by tomorrow afternoon, or sometimes this afternoon, but usually they'll give you a day or two. And their typical season is in season, April to July, August. They walk in wanting to get that boat. Now, there's one more thing that we need to discuss, actually 2 more. One more process is the sales pay plan. It's very important to have a pay plan that supports getting higher margins. Many dealers that I see get their prompting from the auto industry, where they pay 20 to 25% of the gross margin on the deal for the commission. Now, just stating that alone, without strong sales management, I have found that pay plan actually encourages lower margins, because the salesperson gets the person, they've done their dog and pony show, they've got the customer to light on a boat and make them an offer on the boat. And as soon as the customer makes them an offer on the boat, they stop selling the customer on paying more money, and they start selling the owner on taking the offer. And what I've found is that actually encourages lower margins. But there is a better way. Now, that program that I just mentioned about the percentage of gross margin, if you've got strong sales management, you can make that work. Another way you can make that work is, I'll go into this other one first, and you can apply it back to it. Spader has a cost line pay plan that I have watched change many a dealership. The gist of it is there's a base salary that covers minimum wage. There's a predetermined percent of a minimum selling price. Now, remember, we've done our budget. We've determined that we have to have 15, 18, 20, 22, whatever your number is for your different product. You've determined what you need to make on those boats kind of as a minimum margin. And then that is what you pay a percentage of if they achieve the minimum. And then if they go above that, now let's just say, for example, that there's a $50,000 minimum selling price on a boat, and they get paid 2% of that $50,000. So if they sold it exactly at $50,000, they get paid $1,000, 2% times 50. If they sell that boat for $54,000, they get their 2% of the 50, which is $1,000, but then they get 30% of the amount above the 50. So there's $4,000 times 30% is another $1,200. So if they sold it for $54,000, they'd make $2,200 on that instead of $1,000. However, If they go below the 50 by 1 penny, the commission gets cut in half from 2% to 1. So then it goes from 1,000 to 500. So now we have a pay plan that helps to support at least getting our minimum margins. Now we're almost ready to discuss the handling of the trade-in. Rarely do you find a customer who doesn't think their boat is worth more than it really is, the actual cash value, ACV. In other words, the customer wants retail for their boat, you want it for wholesale. So how do we get the two of you together? The next thing to address is the grief process. Now, we normally think of the grief process at the death of a loved one, but research shows we all go through the grief process at the perceived loss of anything. So the tool I'm about to show you will help you transition the customer through this grief process of thinking their trade is worth here when it's really worth here. So we want to get them to move them through that grief process to accepting a more reasonable number. Now, it's important to remember we said in the beginning that in order to get higher margins, you need to have your emotions, the customer's emotions involved. In order to do that, we need to, but that's on the new one. We want to keep them there. But we want the emotions engaged on the new one, but we got to transition them now from emotion on the used boat, the trade-in, to logic. And that's what we're going to do with this form, is to get them back into logic. So I want to discuss this grief process that we keep talking about and show you how it plays in the different roles. Now, the first stage in the grief process is shock and denial. I can't believe you want that much money for this boat. Or more commonly, I can't believe that repair bill is that high. Then we move into the adjustment stage, and inside of that is anger and bitterness and blaming others, and depending on the circumstances, blaming God. And then we eventually get to bargaining. And then, and they may run in and out of here for a while. It might take minutes, it might take months, depending on the circumstances. But then they get to acceptance. Now, acceptance might be, I'm going to buy the boat, or acceptance might be that I'm going to move on and go do something else. But nonetheless, they've settled in their mind what they're going to do. And I think it's important to understand this. For instance, when you're quoting a service bill and they think it should be a lot higher, and part of that adjustment stage is how did you get to it? And so you move your way down through that process. It is amazing to me how this process plays in in many circumstances in our dealerships. As mentioned earlier, people go through the grief process at the perceived loss of anything. Your customers go through that same process when you deal with a repair bill, the trade value, the new boat price, and such. And the main purpose of the trade-in evaluation sheet is to help that customer move through the grief process quicker in order to accept a more reasonable value for their trade. Now, I'd like everybody you've got a handout, a yellow and blue handout that was on your table there, and we're going to start at the top and go through this handout. And if I can get this thing to work here, we can get. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to start at the top and kind of work our way down through this worksheet here. First of all, it's a trade-in appraisal. The first thing you do is take my logo off and put your logo on it, so it can be customized to your dealership. Now, the next thing is the unit info. Here, first of all, you see everywhere you see yellow on this form is a spot where you can fill it in. If you don't see yellow, you don't do anything. Everything else is calculated automatically for you. So, of course, we're putting the customer's name and the model and of the boat and the trailer and and so forth, and the hours on it, and just the pertinent information that it takes in order to be able to get have someone be able to find out comparables on the internet of what this boat could be worth. Now, also, this top page is what the customer sees. There's another page on the back. Don't go to it yet. We'll get to it in just a minute. But the other page is the back side. That's the part the customer doesn't see, but only the salespeople and sales management see, and eventually accounting will see it. All right, so we've filled all that. Now the next thing is the condition. So we want to assess the condition of this boat, and I've just picked a few things here to plug in. We've got R&R faded and scratched decals. If you're from Canada, it's decals. But I don't know, we have any Canadians here? All right. I love that, by the way. And then let's see here. On the engine running condition, R&R, 2 cracked hoses, annual maintenance. Most boats, even if it's in pristine condition, you're going to need annual maintenance on it when you get it in order to be able to justify it to your next customer. And you're probably going to need a buff and a detail on it. So there's at least some minimum stuff on it. Another one here is replace the battery. After 3 years, you should be replacing the battery or recommending to your customers the same way, because don't most batteries fail sometime in that 4th year? That's been my experience. So let's see. Now, I wanted to bring this one thing up here, extended warranty included, up to $2,000 added to the trade value. One of my dealers in one of my 20 groups a number of years ago told me what they did, and I thought it was kind of neat. When a customer had a trade, every customer who had a trade, they would ask them, Mr. Customer, does your boat have an extended warranty on it? No. That's too bad, Mr. Customer, or Miss Customer, whatever. But that's too bad, Mr. Customer. If you had an extended warranty, we could get you up to $2,000 more for your trade. Mr. Customer, do you have a extended warranty on your boat? Yes. That's great, Mr. Customer. I can get you up to $2,000 more for your boat because it's got that on that. Now, what do you think that's doing? Well, it's setting them up, exactly. You're teeing them up that there's value and residual value to a extended warranty, and you're convincing them that they need to leave it on the boat so that the next buyer, you can use it with the next buyer to help sell the boat, so that they don't short rate it when they trade it in and get the refund back on it. And it does a lot of things for you in that area. Now, I've got in here the buff and wax right there, and you pick the numbers that fit for you. These are numbers that I just picked out of the air, if whatever works. Now, there's one thing here. You see that right there? Overall, how would you rate your boat? 1 through 10. When one of my dealers made this comment to me, they use a scale of 1 to 10, and what they would do to get the customer kind of through that grief process, they would get the internet analysis, and for this example, it was 40,500. They would get the internet analysis, and then they would say, Mr. Customer, would you rate your boat? And he said, well, it's probably about a 7. Well, then it's worth about 70% of the value on the internet. So therefore and we did the math on that, it comes out to $28,350, which is pretty close to the number we're going to end up on this sheet. I just thought that was kind of interesting, and it demonstrated there's a lot of ways to use this sheet. All right, now, we're going to move into the meat and potatoes of the part that the customer sees. Whoops. All right, let's see here. Okay. Now, you see the average asking price per the internet analysis is $40,500. Notice that is not a yellow box. Now, on yours it is. I caught that later, and when I send you, if you're interested in getting a copy of the spreadsheet on this, I'll send you. It's already fixed on that one. But that comes from the back page that we're going to talk about in a minute. So, but we've got the average internet analysis. Now, your customers have already been on Boat Trader or one of those websites to get some idea, Craigslist or something, to get some idea what their boat is worth. So you might as well be right up front about it with them. Now, but what they don't expect is the next line here is the anticipated sale price of, we want to sell it within the next 90 days, and in order to be able to get this price or sell the boat, you're going to probably end up taking 15 or 20% less than they were asking for it on the internet. Note, it's you'll see it in a minute, it's the ask price on the internet. It's not the selling price of what they get. So you can justify, in this case, we went 15%. We said the range was 15 to 20. We plugged in 15 on there to make them feel a little better. Then the next thing is the brokerage. Mr. Customer, if you were to have us sell this boat for you, it would cost you 10%. And so that's right in there. And now we've got to pull out the reconditioning costs to get this boat up to our standards to sell the boat. And so now the net trade allowance is $28,560. Does this have logic to you? Does this make sense? What we're trying to do, again, is take them from up here, transition them through the grief process. They think it's worth $40,000, and we're really at $28,000. And so we're trying to at least get them to a more reasonable number. Now, Mr. Customer, let me help you feel better. You see the projected sales tax savings if you're trading. It's a 7% sales tax in this state. That's about $2,000. So in effect, we're getting you $2,000 more for your trade if you trade it in, because you don't pay you only pay sales tax on the difference. So you're saving that money. So the effective trade allowance is like $30,559 is what you're getting for your trade. So that helps them to feel a little better. One dealer I had said, Mr. Customer, it's going to cost you 10% for us to sell it, and you're going to save 7% on the sales tax if you trade it in. So it's really only costing you 3% to do business this way. And then you don't have to worry about getting the late night phone calls and the joyriders, time wasters on their demo. And the worst thing is, what if you sell it to your next door neighbor and the lower unit blows up? Now what are you going to do? You got to deal with that issue, because they're going to be upset about that, and you're going to have to deal with it. So this way, you don't have to have any of that to worry about. And so then there's a little there about the tax and the savings and the net cost of the trade if you wanted to use that. Is this making sense so far, folks? I haven't lost anybody, have I? Yes. Well, we'll get to that. Okay, yeah. Now let's go to let's see here. Let's go to the next page. Flip it over, and the next page, there's a few questions. What we're trying to do here is probe a little deeper on what the real value of this boat is, and we're just asking questions. Any known insurance claim history? Boat engine warranty history. Have you had a lower unit blow up? Have you had an engine replaced? Most recent maintenance, and by whom? Do they do their own maintenance? Was it done by a reputable firm in town? I just came from a dealer a few weeks ago in Canada who had a customer bring their boat to them. They have been getting it serviced, winterized for 5 years. They've been getting it winterized at this one location. When they got ready to do the winterization and change the oil, which they do in all of those, which I recommend you call it annual maintenance rather than winterization. But when they got ready to do the annual maintenance, they found that the oil filter had never been replaced. It still had that original factory paint on the oil filter after 5 years. And the customer was thinking it was all being done when they did the winterization, but all they did was drain the block. So knowing who does it and such is important. Any known saltwater history. If you're a freshwater lake area and the boat has had saltwater use, that's typically, and especially if it's got bottom paint on it, that's got to be worth 20% or so less value on the trade. Any known mechanical or performance issues? Banked lien holder and lien amount there. This I thought was a really good one. Is it currently listed for sale now? If so, how much are you asking for it? And how much would you be willing to take for it? You'd be amazed at what people will tell you if you'll just ask them. Where do you store the boat? Is it stored in your backyard without a cover? Is it in the garage or, where? And then any non-functioning items. Now this last one is the one I like the most. That last question is what I call a conscience question. And that is anything else that you are aware of that could affect the unit's value. And then shut up and listen. You'd be amazed. About 3/4 of the customers I found will come out and tell you, well, this thing's got a soft spot in the floor. There's, there's, when I accelerate, the transom kind of goes in a little bit, which means that, it's rotten. You just be surprised what you can learn in those cases. All right, now flip over to the next page. Let's see here. Okay, now the top part here, again, the yellow is the only thing you fill in, and the top part here is, you notice that this is not yellow. The make and model and all that moved over from the first page. We've got, you'll preload these as to what you're going to use, Trader, Yacht World, Craigslist, or whatever website you use for inboards only or whoever. It just depends on your dealership, but put whatever you find usable. I think it's good to know how many boats are on the market in that website. Like in this case, I just pulled some numbers out of the air here. There's 9 on Trader. The low ask and the high ask is 38 to 44. And then we go down Yacht World and Craigslist. The other thing that I found very effective is to have your salespeople involved in that process of pricing the boat. We used to do it, before we had forms like this, we used to do it where the salespeople would go out and I just have them write, what do you think this boat will sell for in the next 90 days? And we'd pick a number. We'd all write a number down. We'd all show, and there'd be one number every time. It never failed. There'd be one number that would resonate. That's what it's going to sell for. And then we would back off 25 points to get our ACV and then less the reconditioning, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. This makes this a little more sophisticated in that we're now asking each salesperson, okay, what do you think the range will be that this boat will sell for? The low and the high. And so we go through this, and then we come down to an average. And this is designed that if you only have 4 entries on here, then it'll average out the 4. So it's going to give you the average, and now we're getting an average of the average of these. And this boat right here is going to go, we feel like this boat would sell for $40,500 based upon the internet. Is everybody with me so far? We good? All right, now, this number automatically moved to that front page that I mentioned earlier. But you've got, on the back side of the deal, we've got, and if you'll notice at the top there, it says dealer personnel only. The customer's not to see this part. So now we have some factors on that particular model. If this were a XYZ brand and you sell XYZ brand, it's probably going to be worth more to you than it's going to be worth to anybody else. But if you sell XYZ and it's an ABC brand, then it's not going to be quite worth quite as much. So in the desirability of this, you'll notice right here that it's 5%. It's a Sun Deck, a Sea Ray Sun Deck. I'm pretty sure that's a pretty popular model. And so we bumped it up 5%. But then the curb appeal, I'm theorizing that the boat has got faded upholstery and fiberglass, so we're going to ding it 10% based upon curb appeal. Now notice on the left it says adjustments, the rating and the factor, poor, below average, average, and so forth. So it gives you a range to work with. And now we've come up with the number that we really think this boat is going to sell for once it's reconditioned. This is a number, $38,475 is what we really think we're going to get for it. So, if we know that number, and again, these are just the yellow boxes, so you plug in and we want to make 25 points on this boat, then that 25% automatically calculates what the ACV on that boat would be after reconditioning to the $28,856. Is everybody with me so far? Okay. Now, over on the left, you see where it says suggested gross margin factors on the ACV range? And this is just a range. You plug in what you feel comfortable with, but these are some ranges that I've found to be pretty valid. 0 to 5,000. If you're going to sell it at all, it'd be at least a 50% margin on that boat. But a lot of dealers under $5,000 will just wholesale them and not even represent them in their dealership. Then there's the 5 to 10,000, which would be 35 margin, 10 to 25 at 30, 25 to 50 at 25, and then over 50, you may go at 20% on those. Again, you plug in whatever you're comfortable with. Now, you see the estimated reconditioning expenses right below it from the trade-in appraisal. That 2423 is what came in from the other page. You notice it's not a yellow box, so it's automatically done. And so we've got it brought over. But we may not do all of the things that we had on the customer side. We may choose not to replace the decals or the decals, or we might do or not do something else. We may add something more, we may subtract something more. So there's a place to address that right there if you want to do that. In this case, we're going to leave it at 0 and just for the simplicity. So we got our total deductions of $24,23. We're going to reduce the ACV of the boat by that amount of money. So our true ACV for this boat before reconditioning, what we're going to actually put cash money into it before reconditioning is $26,433. We know that hard number, and we know that number fairly quickly. Now, I visit dealerships all the time in our 20 group meetings, and I hear the accounting staff just crying all the time about how they can't get the actual ACV on a trade, and it holds up the deals being processed and all that. But with a process like this, don't you think that would make it a little easier? And technically, you'd be able to have the ACV within minutes. All right. Now, there's a couple more things. You see right here where it says 15%, and the asking price is $45,265. What I've done on this blue box, it's a trade recap, and it just basically recapped all the information above: the ACV before fix-up, the repairs, the ACV after fix-up, the $28,856. We wanted a net selling price. We figure that boat is really going to sell for $38,475. That's what we're really going to get for it. But again, we're not going to ask what we expect to get for it right up front, just like we don't do that on the new boat. So we're going to ask more than we expect to get. And this, you notice it's a yellow box, so it can be, you can plug in 10%, 15, whatever number you want to plug in there. I've used 15%, and the reason why I like 15%, which means that we're dividing the selling price of $38,475 by the reciprocal of the 15%. So there's, if we take 45,265 and multiply it times 15% and then subtract it, it'll come back to this number here. Now, the reason I like 15% is it's easy for a salesperson to figure in their head. They can do it on the fly. If that boat's 45,000, 10% of that is 4,500, 5% of that is 2,250. So they can do that in their head, and it makes it real easy. So if they want to give a 5% discount up, with a customer, or a 10% discount, they know kind of right where they are in order to do that. Again, you use whatever you want. Now, let's go down to the next section here. This is is kind of a very mini version of that deal workup sheet I did a few years ago. And here, a salesperson typically only needs to know two things in order to be able to sell a boat. What's MSRP? What's my minimum selling price? Those two things, and they can run with the deal. And then once they have an ACV on the trade, it's totally in their ballpark to be able to make that thing happen. So, with that information, we've got kind of a customer quote sheet here, and it's kind of a summary of what might be on that quote sheet. So we've got a retail value on this boat of $110,000, and we figured that the minimum price on this boat is $88,000. Now, that would be handed to them. What I want you to see on this is we're going to go down to the next section of sales manager, where you have the actual net profit on the gross margins on the deal and all that. If your shop, the salespeople do not have access to the cost of the boat, then you would copy this sheet over, delete this bottom part from their part, and they wouldn't have that. And then the managers would give you the minimum selling price. But in this case, so we've got the MSRP, and notice it says brand selling prices, which I'd prefer you use. The minimum of $88,000. We're going to do a 7%. Now notice it says savings, not discount. So if it says, I find that savings is a more powerful word than discount. So just FYI. And also notice that the savings is in red. Now the customer's not seeing this, but when you present it to the customer, show them the savings in dollars, not percent. Don't show them the percent. Show them in dollars, and show them that in red, the savings. Because when the customer goes and asks you for a lower price, you can say, well, Mr. Customer, I've already given you over $7,700 for your off on this boat, and we're giving you, as you can see, a fair value for your trade. How much more are you looking for? And then you let them make that next step. You'd be surprised what people will say when you do that. They'll come back and, could you throw in a wakeboard package or a, depth finder or whatever, Anyway, so we have then the dealership price is the next one down, the 102, and then the trade appraisal, which came from the other page on the front side. Notice it's not yellow. And then the trade difference. So now our first quote to this customer trading with them is going to be a difference of $73,741. We also want to know what the minimum is, and that's right here on a minimum deal of $61,567. And even more importantly, we want to know how many dollars of negotiating room do we have. So we've got all that information right away to be able to make that calculation. Now, one other thing I just added to this, is it on your copy where it's got the commission on there? I thought it would be a good idea for a salesperson to know what their commission would be on this boat if they sell it for the first quote, and then what they would be if they sold it at the minimum deal. Now, we're almost done here, folks. How many people have had a customer, when you gave them the first price, they accepted and bought it at the first price. How many people have had that happen? Anybody who's been in business for a while, it happens occasionally. It's not every time, maybe 5% of the deals, or but it happens occasionally. What I had my office manager, Pam, told me a story where they went to buy a car, and her son was buying the car actually, and she was going with them, and they were doing their normal, retail and retail for the car and wholesale, low wholesale for the trade and all that, and she was, just not letting them get away with any of that because she knows all of this stuff. And they said, "What do you do for a living?" So anyway, they gave her a way better deal than the first quote. But she asked the salesman, she said, "How many people actually pay that first price that you quote them?" And the guy said, "You would be amazed how many people actually pay that first price or something close to it." So at least ask for it. It's like my dad said, you can always go down, you can't go up. All right, now the last thing on here, we're getting close to being done, is the sales manager deal recap. Now on this part, there's 2 yellow boxes. We have an invoice with freight and rigging, and we have our minimum margin. So we said on this boat we want to have a 20% minimum margin. The invoice on it was $70,400, and this will automatically deliver that $88,000 to you, and the gross margin on that of $17,600. Notice that's the same number, $88,000, over in the upper right there where we did the sales quote. Now, but we've added a couple more things here. Pretty much the whole deal is right here on this last page, and at the bottom here, and you've got your trade difference. You see the $73,741. If we sell it at that price, then that's our trade difference. But then we're going to add back the actual cash value of $26,433. So that makes the net selling price of the boat with the trade of $100,174. We subtract the invoice with freight and prep, and we get $29,774 as a gross margin on that deal, or a 29.7% margin, which, pretty respectable. Then there's the minimum, the $61,657 is the difference that we had right here. They're dropped straight down. We add back the ACV of the trade. We have our net selling price of the boat at $88 because we said it was a minimum deal. The invoice freight, our $17.60, and our 20% margin. Again, the difference between those two numbers is our negotiating room at $12,174. Now, folks, if you had this information available to you fairly quickly in the sales process, would this be helpful to you? I know it would have helped me. All right. Now, this is the challenge. I've got to figure out how to get back. Let's see here. I hope I didn't mess this up. Well, now I really messed it up. Okay. Well, let's do that again. That's all right. Let's do this way then. We're going to see if we can get there. All right. Well, hopefully, folks, I've been able to show you how to improve your margins. Now, if you would like a copy of this worksheet, this Excel spreadsheet, if you'd like a copy of it, I will send it to you. Just give me a business card, write spreadsheet on the back of it, and I will send it out directly to you by the end of the week. Maybe sooner, but I'll do my best to get it to you right away. All right. Well, thank you, folks, and God bless. Now, any questions?
Yeah, David, with regard to the curb appeal and the reconditioning, aren't those like one and the same?
No. Wait, curb appeal and reconditioning.
The curb appeal adjustment.
Okay.
And the reconditioning.
Good point. They are could be factored in there because you're going to have a detail on the boat and that kind of stuff. And the example I used maybe is not the right one, but you need to have some reasons in there for raising or lowering that based on your own criteria. So maybe it's not the fading or whatever, but I know, well, it's a point. You have a point. So, Tom, hold on.
Maybe to your question, when you and I went through that, the curb appeal might have had to do with more of a desirability question. Like, let's say a boat that was 15 years old with too much color could have too much of the wrong color, and it might be in good shape, but you're not going to take the mauve or purple out of a certain age boat, and that would be curb appeal.
Okay, appreciate it, Tom. By the way, Tom Mack with South Shore Marine in Ohio is the genesis of where this whole thing came from. I was consulting with him for a week there, and he was talking about having the need to have a system and all that, and we just kind of, one thing led to another, and came up with this whole concept. So you can thank Tom for this report if you like it. If you don't like it, then you can blame me for it. Anybody else?
We got one over here.
I just had a quick question. On the front trade appraisal page, it says, the way I was always taught, and maybe it wasn't right, but...
Can you speak up, please?
On the front, on the trade appraisal page, the way I was always taught is there's two questions in there that I was just wondering what your answers to this. If you ask someone about recent maintenance and a customer, and you're always trying to devalue their trade, and those two questions to me kind of...
I'm having hard...
Those two questions to me, the recent maintenance, and overall, how would a customer rate their boat when you're trying to devalue their trade? I mean,
well, these are on here. Those questions are on there. You can change them. When you get that spreadsheet, you can make it anything you want. They're just suggestions for you. And then on that 1 to 10, that's also thrown in there. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. You can just take it out if you want. But if you're in a situation where you don't see the boat, maybe that 1 to 10 scale could work for you if you want to try to move things along a little bit. All right? But thank you.
David, what is your approach, I guess, when a customer comes in with an NADA printed out? Do you try to get off that subject?
The NADA is one of the values. That's a good question. Anybody else? When the NADA, they bring the customer in with the NADA sheet printed out. Do you have a way you handle it, sir? What's that? You have them come in with it all the time? How do you handle it?
Honestly. Yeah. Retail, honestly. Oh. Just being honest with the customer. Retail.
So
explaining to the customer what the NADA actually is, and it actually shows the retail pricing, not what the trade or what the trade value would be, the actual ACV.
Right.
Just explaining it to them and being honest with them.
Right. Now, folks, on this deal that we talked about here, notice that there was $12,000 worth of negotiating room from that first price. We don't expect you to get that first price every time. You're going to negotiate that out, but the beauty of it is, if you've now lowered the customer's expectation on that boat to $28,000, and when you give them, if you come back and give them $33,000 or $35,000 and give up half of your negotiating room, you still end up with a $6,000 over cost line deal or your minimum price deal, and you're able to most likely put that deal together somewhere in between those two numbers. So I found that to work really well. Anybody else? All right, folks, y'all have been great. Thank you. And just don't forget about the cards. If you want me to send those, send you that spreadsheet, just drop them off to me on the way out.